Kia ora, good morning everybody. Good to see you all. This morning I gave a pretty substantive speech on trade and particularly New Zealand's position around trade. It's been good to see overnight some de-escalation of the tariffs from the US, albeit suspended for 90 days. But it still doesn't change the fundamental premise, which is that we want to continue to advocate very strongly on the world stage for free trade. It's with that in mind why this afternoon I'll be talking to a number of world leaders just about that case and making that case to continue to stay strong with like-minded countries around the actual trade-based system that we have today. We think that serves us very incredibly well. With that, happy to take any questions.
Can you tell us?
I will confirm that at the end of the day. I want to be able to have those conversations first, and then I will confirm at the end of the day with you. There's a series of calls through the course of the afternoon until about 9 o'clock tonight.
The idea of getting a CPTPP in the EU to give us a sort of response to this, is that your idea? Has that been discussed elsewhere? Where's that coming from?
It's my thought that actually there's a real opportunity for us to acknowledge there's 27 countries in the EU. Obviously we've got 15% of world trade tied up in the CPTPP. There's a real opportunity for us to coordinate and to work together, and I'll be having some of those conversations today as well.
And are you thinking a formal accession, that the EU would formally join the CPTPP?
Well, for that to happen, you actually need all 27 countries to sign up for that, and that could take some time. But it's just making sure that if there's opportunities where we can actually create an environment where free trade can take place, that would be, or create an environment where we actually continue to remove the irritants and the frustrations around trade and get rid of those non-trade tariff barriers and a whole bunch of other things that we could be working on. Let's at least explore that opportunity, see if there's anything.
Do you think there would actually be an appetite for that, though, for all of the European countries to come into it? And is that part of the conversations that you'll be having with presumably European leaders this afternoon? I will have one of those. I will be having that conversation today, but that'll be ultimately a decision for the EU, and it does require a ratification process, as you're aware, that's quite slow. What I'm looking for is actually how can we bind as many countries as possible? If there's countries that are already, looking at the CPTPP, how do we, for example, UK is still requiring ratification from Canada and from Mexico. So how do we speed that up and get them fully into the system? Can you see this afternoon, just to be clear though, are you talking to world leaders from throughout Asia, Europe, all over the place, or can you be a little bit more specific about what area we're talking about here?
You'd understand a lot of my focus is on the Indo-Pacific in particular, the countries that I have visited and the leaders that I've built relationships with, and wanting to check in with them and really understand where they are and how they're interpreting what's going on in the world and what more we could be doing and should be doing together as a region. But I also will be talking to European leaders as well.
Is there any benefit in...
Yes, what we really need is real certainty, and part of the problem is the instability and the uncertainty. So this morning we've woken up and there's been a suspension of reciprocal tariffs above the 10% level for many countries for 90 days. What I know is that as a business leader, that is not something that the CEOs of big, large American companies have a lot of certainty around. And so when you think about laying down investments, when you think about growing your organisations, the danger is everybody's just sitting there in a state of stasis, actually not wanting to invest. Consumers don't want to purchase or buy because they're not sure what's happening next with pricing.
What's your message to Donald Trump about that? What would you say to him?
Well, it's the same message we've said very clearly, which is that, look, we just do not think tariffs and trade wars are the way to go. We think that's got huge impact on global economic growth. We are a country that has benefited, as I said this morning, from our history incredibly well by advocating very strongly for free trade. It's important to New Zealand. 1 in 4 of our jobs are tied to trade. Trading companies pay their workers higher wages and salaries. It's important for us to continue that work. So that is why we've been out and about in the world the last 16 months, which is why we'll continue to go out. I said this morning I'll be going to the UK to meet with Keir Starmer in particular over a number of issues by the end of this month. We've got to keep remaking the case and remake the case strongly for free trade in the rules-based system.
Just on the meeting or just on this call, what would you articulate as a successful meeting? What are you looking to get out of it?
Well, it's just really, I'm wanting first and foremost to understand how each of the leaders and their political leadership is interpreting events of the last few days. I want to make the case to like-minded countries around the importance of sticking together and continuing to advance the case of free trade around the world where we can, and if there's things that we can accelerate, let's look at doing that as well.
Do you see any benefit?
Have you had with the US regarding that 10%, and is there any kind of negotiation going on regarding some kind of like a match in terms of the reciprocal tariffs? Do they see we tariff them at 1.9%? What discussions have you had there?
Well, first and foremost, we won't be applying a reciprocal 10% tariff on US product coming into New Zealand. And the reason is very simple, is that will only end up hurting New Zealand workers because they will pay higher prices. It'll actually lead to higher inflation. Therefore, what we've just experienced, actually the last 2 or 3 years, we've been trying to get out of that situation. So that's not good for New Zealanders, and I'm not going to do that. The reality is, as you know, it's about 0.2% of our GDP, $900 million, that's been levelled on New Zealand exporters going into the US. When I've talked to the exporters involved over the course of the last week, many of them are still feeling very positive about the long-term prospects for the US. They're still very invested in that market. They can still see huge amounts of opportunity. But they are simply just going to pass that tariff straight through to the US consumer, who is ending up paying it. The US consumer sitting there facing rising costs on goods and services that come from all over the world into the US market is going to be experiencing price inflation. That's going to slow the economic growth down. That's going to have huge impact on the global economy.
Just on China, there's still this back and forth war going on between the US and China. Obviously, China is our largest trading partner. I mean, how concerned are you by that?
Well, I mean, we're concerned in general. I mean, we just don't believe that tariffs and trade wars is the way to go forward. We actually think the world has been incredibly well served. If you think about the first GATT round in 1947, what we're seeing is probably the biggest disruption over the course of the last couple of weeks to that order. So we don't think trade wars and tariffs are any good for the global economy, and as a result, that's why we're advocating against it.
Can you see any benefit in us?
Discussions that our government or officials are having with the US?
Yes, I mean, right from the beginning, as you know, pre the announcement, we've had our officials in, we've had a series of senior ministerial engagements. I think that's been very positive. You know, we have a very positive, working, constructive relationship with the US. We're going to continue to make sure we do. But we also, since the announcement, have been making sure our officials have been in there making the case for New Zealand again and again, and will continue to do so. And so as we have higher level ministerial engagements, ultimately even I guess at a leader to leader level, we'll continue to make that case.
Can I just ask you about the two principles bill, which is before the House today? Some people would have been looking to you to provide some leadership as the Prime Minister to talk to this bill. Why are you not doing that?
Well, the first thing is the National Party is going to vote down the Treaty Principles Bill today. Our position has been incredibly clear about the position that we're taking as a party, and frankly, now it's time for us all to move on. We've had an iteration of those views. There's been positions on each side of that articulated over the period of the Select Committee process. We in a modern MMP environment, as I've said, we've come to a compromise, but we're doing what we said we would do, and we've been consistent about that position. So the bill gets voted down. We now move on. This morning I've spent time with Rukawa in our iwi Accord meeting. We talk a lot in these conversations about, right, what are we going to do to actually get things done for Māori and non-Māori? And that's been my focus this morning.
You're saying the words move on, but the country is still very much divided. As the Prime Minister, shouldn't you provide some leadership to help the country move on in unity?
Well, we will and we are. And my conversations...
But you're not doing that because you're not speaking onto the bill.
My position is really clear about the bill. The party's position is very clear about the bill. We're going to vote it down, and it is time for us to move on. We're facing huge amounts of economic upheaval. We've got some major challenges facing New Zealand. It's important today that I'm doing what I'm doing.
Can you just tell us where you're going to be? Why can't you be there?
Sorry?
Where are you going to be? Why can't you be there?
I'm due to go back to Auckland, and then I've got a series of engagements and meetings, as I said.
So why didn't you prioritise it? You signed up to this, right? Like, you went into coalition negotiations. You are the reason that the country is having the debate.
Well, let's be clear.
Don't you have any responsibility to be part of the debate that you started?
Yeah, so let's back up. I mean, I think, you know, we've acknowledged, as I've said before, and I'll reiterate what I've said ad nauseum over the last few months, we're in a modern MMP environment. We have 6 parties in this parliament that have very differentiated, different positions, different constituencies that they represent. They come to this place, and we have to make MMP work, and that requires compromise. And that's what we did. And so we have an agreement where an issue that has, I get it, strong views on all sides of that debate and discussion was aerated over the course of the first reading and into a Select Committee process. I said consistently we would vote it down at second reading. That's exactly what we're going to do today. We'll have National Party people talking to the bill. My position's been very clear about that. We do not think that 185 years of history gets written with a stroke of a pen through a simple treaty principles bill. We think the National Party approach of old and future is about taking each issue case by case and dealing with them case by case.
Do you have any regrets?
But what we have to do now is actually move forward, and that is we are facing economic upheaval. We've got lots of opportunities, and we've got some challenges to deal with in this country, and we want to work together with iwi. I continue to work with iwi, as you've seen, involving on delegations and infrastructure summits, meetings I've just had this morning. Really important. We've got serious things to get done for people to improve their outcomes.
Facing down
Sorry.
all of that economic upheaval.
Back at the Treaty Principles Bill from day one to now. Do you have any regrets at all?
No, MMP requires compromise. Reality of a modern
Facing all
MMP
of that
environment.
economic upheaval, why did you waste everyone's time with a debate that was going nowhere?
No, our party position is our party position and our caucus position. No, none.
Were those meetings this morning about the bill?
Sorry?
Were the meetings this morning about the bill?
No, they're about actually how we work together and actually have a clear work plan and a set of actions actually as to how we advance outcomes for iwi and actually work together. There is a lot, we have a government that believes in localism and devolution. We have iwi with mana motuhake. There's very, very strong values alignment. So while this debate has been going on, I have been meeting consistently all the time with different iwi groups, having these conversations about how do we get better housing outcomes, how do we get better education outcomes, what are we doing about health outcomes, how do we advance your economic interests, how do we work together. So we have a series of these meetings. That's the conversations that I have on an ongoing basis and will continue to do so.
This morning at the conference down the road at Te Papa, you said that it was a much more interesting than the next few meetings I've got. Are the meetings with the likes of Rokawa less interesting to you, less important?
No. I've had some other internal meetings inside in my office as well.
Who were
Other people.
the internal meetings with that were boring?
You're talking about moving on now that the Treaty Principles Bill, we can assume that it will be voted down this afternoon. It opens up a pathway now for your treaty clauses review and other pieces of policy work to be advanced. When you're talking about things like health and education outcomes, how do you think that they will be strengthened based on how you're going to review or potentially repeal clauses in different pieces of legislation?
Well, look, I mean, that's a different issue. We don't believe in generic, open-ended, general treaty clauses in legislation. We want to see treaty clauses, we want respect for the treaty, we want to make sure that it's in legislation, but it's got to be appropriate and it's got to be linked to the purpose of the legislation, because otherwise all we're getting is huge amounts of poor clarity and lots of uncertainty. So generic, hanging, open-ended treaty clauses is not the way forward. What we want is specific legislation so that the obligations are really clear on all parties about what's involved.
Sure, but some of the most specific clauses that have been developed through Waitangi tribunal inquiries and other very close, careful policy work like Section 7AA in the Oranga Tamariki Act, like in the corrections bill that have both been stripped out. Those were incredibly specific and developed over a long period of time, and you've decided to remove them. So I'm just trying to understand.
Well, each of those, that's what I mean, we'll pick up each issue case by case. So on Section 7AA, I appreciate there's different points of view about that, but when one child dies every 5 weeks, we're going to prioritise and make sure the practice that actually is happening as a function of that legislation is putting that above and beyond anything. That is priority number one, safety and the well-being of the child. It doesn't preclude from iwi or family or hapu being involved in that, but the first order effect is first and foremost, the priority is the safety and well-being of the child, not the other way around. And so that you can disagree with that, but that's our view, and then therefore, and as we go forward, we just want to make sure that legislation is really specific. You can imagine things like RMA reform, general hanging clauses out there don't help. What you want is specificity, and we're going to continue to do that. Okay, last question, yeah, I better go.
Do you feel like you're trying to salvage what's left of the trading order, and do you think that's possible?
Yes, I do. Look, I think there's, even in cursory conversations with different ambassadors already over the course of the last week, and other commentary that's come from other world leaders, the reality is that there are a number of us that have already benefited. As I said this morning, the CPTPP started because Singapore, New Zealand and Chile had an idea at an APEC meeting 20 years ago, and that then morphed out into something that now accounts for 15% of world trade. That is a comprehensive, high-quality agreement now that actually creates real value and lifts the living standards of people in all parties. Sorry, Mikey, last question.
Do you have a birthday message for the Deputy Prime Minister who turns 80 tomorrow?
I think he's doing an outstanding job. He's actually out on tour or on trips doing the business for New Zealand and Tonga, Vanuatu and Hawaii with a cross-party delegation going with him as well. But I just wish him a happy birthday and just thank him for the great work he's doing for New Zealand and has done. Thank you. All right, thanks, guys.